Welcome to TFP, the Theater Folk Podcast. I am Lindsay Price, resident playwright for Theater Folk. Hello, I hope you're well. Thanks for listening. Today, Craig and I continue our conversation on the shows we saw in England. But first, let's do some Theater Folk news. This week, our June newsletter comes out, Spotlight. This month is a bit of a best of. We've pulled together some playwriting exercises that we've had on the newsletter, on our blog over the years, and we put them together in one nice, tidy package. After the analysis newsletters, I like these exercise ones the best because I like being able to provide something practical for you guys. And I'm not a big reader of dense text at the best of times. My eyes tend to really roll back into my head. And I've never been able to learn just by listening or just by reading. I always learn something by doing it, the practical application. So you have it straight from the horse's mouth. This month, no dense text, all practical exercises that you, your students, can use to get writing right away. And where can you find this podcast? We post new episodes every Wednesday at theaterfolk.com and on our Facebook page and Twitter. You can find us on the Stitcher app. And you can subscribe to TFP on iTunes. All you have to do is search on the word Theater Folk. Episode 45. Is it okay to leave at intermission? So that's a bit of a spoiler, I suppose. Obviously, we're asking the question because it is something that we did, in fact, do. So while we were in England, the next show that Craig and I went to see was a production of a play called Silly Cow in Hastings. And this is what we had to say about the show and the question in question. Alrighty. Craig and I are still in the UK. And we are still in Hastings, and we have gone to see our second play.
We saw a Ben Elton farce called Silly Cow.
Silly Cow. Now, there are two important things to know. Silly Cow was written for
Don French.
Don French. And Google Don French. Don French is a long-standing comedian. Mm-hmm. And I think...
Yes, D-A-W-N, Dawn.
Dawn. And I think that she is a hysterical. She can be very, very funny.
Mm-hmm. She was part of French and Saunders, and she had a great series called Murder Most Foul.
Murder Most Foul. We used to watch French and Saunders all the time, about 10 years ago. And Ben Elton, who wrote this farce, is actually pretty well known, even to American standards. Even if his name isn't well known, his work is kind of well known.
Mm-hmm. He was one of the writers on Blackadder, which a lot of people know, the Rowan Atkinson show, and he also wrote for the Mr. Bean stuff. He more recently he did the libretto for Love Never Dies, which is the sequel to The Phantom of the Opera, and also We Will Rock You, which is the sort of the ABBA or the Queen version of Mamma Mia.
Okay, so we went to see this show because it was here. It was a community theater production at a theater called The Stables, which was, when Craig and I walked in, we commented that it would be a great fringe venue.
Yeah, it looked like it was very a narrow theater, very steep audience rise, and actually a very deep but narrow stage.
Yes. And then the curtain rose in a very dramatic fashion, actually. It didn't part, the curtain didn't part in the center. It parted in the center and then rose up to the sides. So it parted in a very dramatic fashion. And then the show began. So, Craig, tell me your definition of farce. What is a farce to you?
To me, farce is a very, very it's a heightened drama, and it's heightened so heavily that it becomes funny, it becomes comedy, and it's basically the key to farce, I think, is everything can fall apart at any second. Yes, you have to keep fighting to keep the show on its on the rails.
Keep your story on its rudders. I have attempted to write a farce. I have a half-written farce in a drawer that I keep going back to and taking a stick and poking it and then going, I can't write this. And one day I'm going to have to actually buckle down and finish it. And I think it's because of that, because it's very dependent on, it's a house of cards, basically. And your main character is constantly rebuilding the house of cards. Is that a good description of it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, I would say then that based on this description, the show that we saw, Silly Cow, did not accomplish this. And Craig and I disagree, which is, we always disagree on this point when we go to a show and we don't like it. I always blame the script, and Craig always blames the actors.
Yes, and definitely I'm absolutely 100% correct in...
See, I think I'm 100% correct. Okay, you go. You
okay.
go. You tell me.
I'll tell you why.
You go.
This was a show that was originally written for Don French. And I think that in hands like hers, like a great performer's hands, that you wouldn't even ever consider the script. There are opportunities for improvisation in the script. There's opportunities for, commenting on current events in the script. And I think that it's designed for that type of performance. Now, what we saw was people doing a more scripted version of the script, and not successfully.
They didn't have a good handle on their lines even at this point.
Mm-hmm. And so I yes, and they also didn't have a really great. I will say this: they. This is going to sound like a backhanded compliment, but they had very clear diction. They were very loud. They were always faced downstage when it was important for us to see and hear them. But apart from that, they also. I will say this too. They also the actors all had characterizations, but they didn't. There was zero depth. The characters were consistent, but to the detriment of the show, where every line was delivered with the exact same intention, and it was consistent, and it was lovely that they were so committed to their characters, but they never allowed the characters to have any kind of range or depth or ever change. And I think that's what acting is.
Well, this was a directing problem, and there were lots of directing problems in this script because the entire text, which is where I think it all falls apart, really hinges on the miscommunication, the misplacing of an envelope. The way that they handled the misplacing of the envelope was so obvious. And then there is actually a line very clearly that says basically, hey, this was what was in the other envelope. And it was so plain. And there was really nothing, at least till the end of Act 1, of any juggling, of any house of cards coming down at any moment. I just thought the script was just pedantic and straightforward, and there was at no point did I feel like this play could go off the rails at any moment. And that's textual. That is textual. I mean, it was just, we plodded along from point to point, and there was really and there was nothing that happened. There was nothing that was being shown to me. There is a court case that happens in this play. And basically, the character just basically says, hey, I'm going to court. And she talks and talks and talks about everything that's going to happen in court. And then the next scene is after court. And she talks and talks and talks about what happens in court. Now, Craig believes that with a better actress...
I think that those would be like tour de force scenes that you would sit there and think were brilliant events where what happened was not.
See, and I just go, why not show me what's happening? Why not show me this? Because the title, Silly Cow, is actually a character who we don't meet,
Oh, it's her too, I think, too.
Yeah, well, it's very specific that it's mentioned at least 7 times that the woman who's suing the main character is the silly cow.
I think she refers to herself as a silly cow, too.
No, she refers to herself as a mean bitch.
Oh, okay.
Regardless, it doesn't matter. It's a farce. I didn't feel textually it was a farce, nor performance-wise. Certainly not performance-wise it was a farce. I think both of us, whether or not we disagree on where the fault in the text lies, we did not see a farce.
Okay, so let's shift into the next part of the conversation.
Sure.
Because it's possible that the second act did turn into farce, and the first act was a big setup. But we did not stay for the second.
We did not stay for the second act.
And I'll tell you why, though. The main reason is they didn't really know their lines so well, and especially with a community theater type show, if they don't know the lines in the first act, they're definitely not going to know them in the second act because the shows are rehearsed in order. So
front to back, front to end, and it is pretty consistent. It's the same actually in high school. You know, if things are going awry in the first act,
it's not going to pick up.
It's going to be the same in the second act because it was way less time is spent on the second than the first. I've been in a number of those kinds of productions. Mm-hmm. It's possible. It just Craig and I looked at each other and we just went, "Are we going to learn anything else from this? We're not enjoying it.
No.
It was hot. It was uncomfortable." And we looked at each other and went, "Are we going to enjoy this more?" And both of us felt no. And I think that we've been together now for 20 years. We've seen many plays. We have walked out on a number of them. Mm-hmm. And in 20 years, the only play that I can think of that got better in the second act was the Broadway production of Anything Goes that we saw. Mm-hmm. And that, for a variety of reasons, I think that was the show is better. It had nothing to do with the production.
That was the script.
They were working their patooties off in that. And it just that the script got tighter and shorter and everything got better. And I think because we were watching the tour de force production of Sutton Foster, we wouldn't have left anyway. No, I think it was. I mean, Anything Goes ended with this brilliant tap number, and you knew that there was going to be at least one huge number in the second act that was going to be brilliant too. So that's really what you were going back for. Yeah, more brilliance.
But I don't feel bad. I know some people will never ever leave an intermission; they'll always go back, and I have no problem with leaving at intermission. It doesn't bother. Like, why would I sit there and see something?
Well, this is not an exercise in punishment.
No.
And it's not. This should be the reason we go to the theater is because we like the theater. Mm-hmm. If we don't like the theater, what is the point in staying?
Well, you have your own tastes too. I mean, there's shows that I'm sure that I thought were brilliant, and other people couldn't stand,
I have to say,
there was a lot of laughter tonight. People loved the show.
There was a lot of laughter. But
it's opening night and it's a community theater show.
I personally
a lot of wives and friends and
I really got the feeling that the laughter was, look at Jane
at Joe
doing something so funny. She's walking.
She never acts like that at
funny.
home. Yeah.
She never walks like that at home, and that's what I felt. I felt that it was laughter of recognition of actor as opposed to thinking the play was funny, because there were a number of places that should have been drop dead funny and weren't at all. Yeah, I don't feel bad about leaving for that precise reason. I go because I enjoy it, and if I'm miserable, I don't know why sitting through the second act is a charitable or a noble thing. Why is it noble for me to be miserable?
Yeah.
Having said that, it kind of makes us hypocrites, because we are artists, and you have been in shows, and I have certainly written shows, and I know from my personal perspective that if someone ever walked out of my show, I would find that pretty devastating.
Mm-hmm. No, I've seen people walk out in the middle of performances that I've been in, or you notice people that don't return after intermission, and I mean, it's not too much fun, to tell you the truth, but you can't be so narcissistic about why it is that they're leaving. I mean,
Yes.
maybe they're sick. Maybe they got a call at intermission from the babysitter and their kid is sick. Maybe, well, any number of reasons.
Maybe
I mean,
they don't like, it has nothing to do with you. They don't like the show. Mm-hmm. Again, as you just said, it all comes down to personal taste, right? And we cannot be, as artists, it is not our job to please everybody. It is our job to put on the best of our ability, a good show. Mm-hmm. And if we do our best to the best of our ability to put on a good show, what we consider to, again, you cannot determine what the world thinks is a good show. You can only determine what you think is a good show. You can only determine what, that you are exercising your craft to the best of your ability. If you do that, then, and you have pride in your work, whether it's acting or writing or directing or whatever, that's all you can do, and you go home and you sleep. Mm-hmm. You can sleep through the night, and everything is fine. And it is inevitable that people will not agree with your best work. No,
and it's hard too, because sometimes you're in a comedy and people aren't laughing, and or you're even in a drama, and in your own dumb brain starts to perceive that the audience isn't into it, and there's this impulse to change things up to try and get the laugh or try and get the reaction that you're looking for. And that's really not the right thing to do. You got to stick with, you can't just start reinterpreting the show just to please one person who has a poopy pants look on their face in the front row. You've got to stick to your craft. You got to stick to what you rehearsed. You got to stick to your intentions. Just go back to the basics and just focus on performing the play to the best of your abilities. It's really easy to say and really hard to do, because especially in a venue where you can see some of the people in the audience, it's really tough. You know how it is when we've done the Fringe festivals. You'll see somebody with a real cross look on their face, and who knows? Maybe that's what their face looks like.
Oh, the best was when they pulled out their program in the middle of the show and started leafing through it, and you're just like, that is a knife in my heart. That is a knife right there in my heart. And I know it all the time, because it happens to me when I'm in the front of a classroom and I'm teaching, because there is nothing that is more difficult, I think, than to engage 30 teenagers. In fact, it is impossible. It's unnecessary. It's my job to go in and teach to the best of my ability. But I feel it. I feel it all the time, that I want to ratchet up the dog and pony show, that I want to go into performance mode and talk louder and talk faster and gesture bigger. When not, inevitably, what I have found is if I do the exact opposite, if I just bring it all down and I just focus on saying my words slower and clearer and quieter, they tune in. 9 times out of 10, that's what happens. And I feel better as a communicator, because I'm not dancing on a heated plate to try and go faster. I'm just doing my job.
And sometimes too, you'll do a line that gets a huge laugh that's never gotten any kind of titter before, and then you start going over in your head how exactly you delivered that line, right? Because you want to get that laugh again. And then the next night you get to that moment and you're all ready for that big laugh, and it never fails to die, because you can't. See, the thing is, every time you're on stage, it's a new relationship with that audience, and I think that's why you can't focus on just one sour person, because there's all those other people there that you can't see, like the people beyond those first couple of rows.
Beyond the footlights.
There are people with big smiles on their faces. There are people who are engaged. And I'm telling you, some people you walk down the street and just look at someone walking down the street. There's people who just have sour looking faces. And those might be the ones in your front row. It has nothing to do with you. That's just what they look like.
Yeah, and some people engage silently. Some people, they don't engage audibly, and it's always funny. It always happens that at the end of the show, they're usually the ones that are applauding the loudest, and you thought that they weren't even listening.
Yeah.
So this is taking a very interesting turn, all because we
walked out of a show.
We walked out of a show in Hastings, UK.
But we did leave the show because we didn't like it.
We did.
No, I thought it really seemed to me to be like a virtuoso piece, and it really did seem to me to be written for one, like a showpiece for one person. I'm not sure it is possible to do a great production of this particular show because
this woman wasn't up to it, and well, you know what? I don't think that's fair to say. I think the director wasn't up to it because I thought that, as I said, the
there was some weird blocking.
I got tired watching the main character circle the couch. So she just basically she circled the couch was her blocking pattern, and she circled it and circled it and circled it and circled it, and I just couldn't believe how ham-handed the miss placing of the envelope was. I'm like, I'm watching you, dude. I can see. Oh, okay, that's gonna happen. That's gonna come up, and oh yes, there's a line of text, and I'm sure that's going to sort of play into Act 2. But you know what, Craig?
We'll never know.
We'll never know.